Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Nuance Needed. I'm Amanda.
And this is Sam.
And today we are going to go on a deep dive about depression. And I'm sort of off the top saying, what if a lot of what we thought about depression is wrong? And what if a lot of depression is actually connected to anxiety?
We should also announce that Amanda has done this deep dive.
You can't see it on a video, but I have an outline.
She has an outline, and I am blind right now.
Yes.
All I have right now is my training up
Yes.
to this point and my understanding of depression. And so any reaction that I have to what she says, this is like real time.
Yes.
So
We'll see how this... You guys can let us know what you think.
if you even like this, we're switching it up.
Yeah. So this was really fun for me because I basically went down a rabbit hole of how we talk about depression and like what the research says about it. But I wanted to start, Sam, by asking you, like, when a client comes in and says that they're depressed, how do you typically like explain it to them? Like, if they're interested in being on medication, how do you typically explain it?
So I typically start with the exploration of what is actually happening in their current life. Mm-hmm. I always assess the immediate situation that the client finds themselves in because depression can be situational, which would then mean it's not necessarily labeled as depression, but we are having symptoms that feel similar to a diagnosis of depression. So I want to make sure that are we in grief? Are we having really difficult issues within our relationship? Are we burnt out from work? Are we, like any number of like life circumstances can make it hard to get out of bed, change our appetite, make us feel hopeless, make us feel, like we're moving through quicksand, right? There's so many different facets to it. And so I always start with the exploration of the current moment we're in. I then go into, have you ever experienced this before? Is this typical for you? Is there a predictable timeline to it? And assessing from like that realm. And then I'll like throughout that assessment, I'll dive into like, well, this is what someone with major depressive disorder would look like. This is what their life would feel like on a consistent daily, weekly, monthly basis. And breaking it down in that way. So that's my professional approach.
That's an A+ answer. Good job.
I'm still good at my job. Yay!
You are. Good job. Do you remember in 2022? I remember because I was pregnant and I like didn't have the brain capacity to look into this. But do you remember in 2022 there was like this big study that came out that like debunked the chemical imbalance theory? Did you look into that? Do you know about that?
No, because 2022 was a rough time for me as well. So we were getting by. I do remember when it dropped, I had barely started doing like one-on-one therapy at that point. I was still like deep in like community mental health work, like with the ER and all of that. And that was like my background. So I kind of like, I let it sit over here. And then by the time I was like in something different, I'd forgotten about it. So.
Well, there was a huge response to it. And then there was also like a backlash to the response. So I was very interested in all of that. So basically, a research team at University College London published a review with decades of serotonin research. And they looked at like major studies across the area. And they basically concluded that there was no convincing evidence that depression is caused by low serotonin. And then there was a big backlash to it. And what's really interesting about that is I was thinking about how I actually still explain how SSRIs work. And I will be, this is not anti-medication at all. No. I'm on medication. I will be on medication probably for the rest of my life. So we're very pro-medication over here, or whatever works for you. So I just, I often describe it to patients as it's not that when you take an SSRI, you are being given more serotonin in your brain. It is that the molecule sits on the part of your brain that sucks up the extra serotonin, so you end up with more serotonin in your brain. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing when I went into the research about it is that's not false. That is what like an SSRI stands for, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So that is correct. But as I say that, it is no longer believed that low serotonin is what causes depression. And what's fascinating about this study that came out, and I'm going to share some of the origin story of it. But what's so fascinating about when this study came out, it was like a really big deal. People were like so upset. I remember lots of people were claiming they were going to like get off their medication. And it was like this moral panic of like, have we been lied to by psychiatrists? And the more nuanced understanding of it, and I actually talked to my friend who's a psychiatrist, Eli, about it. Eli works at Therapy for Women Center. He runs like the psychiatry arm of it, so to speak. And he actually had a really good explanation. What did Dr. Eli say?
That 2022 paper basically showed there's no solid evidence that depression is caused by low serotonin in a simple chemical imbalance way. That part is true, but it got a bit overinterpreted. Most psychiatrists already don't think depression is just low serotonin. It's much more complex. Brain circuits, stress, neuroplasticity, multiple neurotransmitters, etc. The pushback was mainly that the study knocked down an oversimplified idea, but didn't mean serotonin isn't involved or that antidepressants don't work. Meds like SSRIs still help, just probably by changing brain circuits over time rather than fixing a deficiency. TLDR, we already knew that it wasn't that simple, so it just confirms what we knew. And it doesn't mean serotonin isn't involved and that SSRIs don't work. Plus, depression is clearly heterogeneous, kind of like cancer in my mind.
Basically, right, what we're saying is what's interesting about this is that this study made a bunch of like waves because it was actually like a really great marketing angle of being like, look, antidepressants don't work. When all of these psychiatrists were like, no, we never said that this chemical imbalance was why antidepressants work. But the general public, I think, did. I mean, I clearly did based on how I was explaining it to people. And basically up until I did this research, I will change. I mean, I don't know, right? It's an interesting thing where how I'm explaining it is correct, but having more serotonin isn't necessarily the only fix. Exactly. Right. But it made me dig into sort of where did this idea come from? And what's interesting is basically this theory of depression was first proposed in the 1960s. It was like this loose, academic hypothesis. Most people hadn't heard of it, but once they created SSRIs, popular ones like Prozac, especially in 1987 launched, and in the 1970s, policy actually changed, which allowed pharmaceutical companies to market directly to consumers. Before that, and right, like in a lot of other countries, pharmaceutical companies cannot market directly. It's all through doctors. So because of this change, drug companies kind of needed like a simple story to sell. So they reached back into this theory, which I don't know if by 1987 they had already debunked it or it just wasn't that popular. But they basically needed this story to sell. So they kind of were like, depression is caused by low serotonin. Take this medication. Boom, you feel better. And what's really cool is that researchers tracked the word like chemical imbalance in Google Books data. And the phrase really went from not being known or talked about to really exploding with this advertising change, not because any new research came out that supported this theory. And like, to be fair, right, I think also some of why people adopted this framing, and I think it's really interesting as I think about addiction too, is they did it because there is still a lot of stigma in mental health. Like, I think about this with addiction all the time, and I'm interested in your thoughts, right? There was a huge wave as I did research for my book, Not Drinking Tonight, of how we used to think addiction was caused by like moral problems, and these were just scum of the earth, terrible people who couldn't stop drinking. And then it was like, no, it's a spiritual malady. They need God, right? And that's sort of where AA came in. And now we talk about it as a brain disease, as, you know, there's something wrong with your brain. But it is really hard. Again, the brain is so freaking complicated, and we're like always learning more about it. So they try to kind of be like, and I remember teaching these classes when I worked in rehabs, where we would be like, look at this brain of someone on meth, and look at this regular brain. Look, it's proof that someone has a brain disease, that you are an addict with a brain disease. But the problem is that behavior also wires and changes the brain. That's how neuroplasticity works. Neuroplasticity means that your brain can change and grow and develop. So it is very complicated, I think, to explain these things. So I understand wanting to just kind of be like, depression is a brain disease, it's not your fault, rather than trying to be really complicated about it, when I think there is a lot of just looking at brain scans, just measuring serotonin in the brain doesn't just tell the whole story necessarily. And what's even more interesting is that part of the research also showed, which even the critics agreed with, is people who are on antidepressants long term actually have lower serotonin sometimes than people who are not on them, which is fascinating.
That is, wow.
So they think it might be something with, your brain sometimes overcompensates.
Right.
Right, if you're on an SSRI or something else. But it really shows that serotonin is not the key. I mean, there was a lot of pushback to this research, and they were accused of cherry picking articles. Yeah. And if you look at the overall scientific consensus, it is clear that antidepressants work. We just aren't exactly sure how they work. And like Eli was saying, there's probably different types of depression.
You know, what you just said of how people who are on SSRIs for a long time are actually found to have less serotonin. I think it's kind of like when you haven't had glasses or contact and you go in to get a prescription, and then you start using glasses and contacts, and then you kind of panic because you feel like after you're like, oh my God, my vision's gotten worse since I got these. And it's like, no, your eyes stopped straining to see, and now they've just relaxed into
I didn't
the
even
lens.
know that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why they say
I thought that your eyes got worse. I was like, I'm going to put off getting glasses for as long as possible. I don't need them yet, but.
No, it's when I went back. When did I get glasses? I got glasses and contacts the first time, I want to say in 2018, I think. And my first appointment after getting them, when I was like, oh, I think things are feeling like just that very, very faint, fuzz, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm really worried. I don't know. Yeah. I feel like my eyesight has gotten significantly worse. And he was like, well, no, that's what's supposed to happen. Because he said your eyes are actually resting at a normal rate now. Because you've removed the tension, and now they have a clear line of vision. So they're not straining to focus and see things all the time. But eyes aside, this conversation is timely for me because there's something I've been thinking about a lot, in my work and I think my own life, which is really the thesis of why you and I are here in the first place, right? Which is this misunderstanding, this aggressive misunderstanding that has woven its way through the culture, through language around mental health, and how we've beaten the stigma of awareness, but we haven't beaten the stigma of treatment.
Woo!
We're fine to talk about it, and everybody gets to talk about it and say that they have, they struggle with this, they wrestle with that, they have this, they do that. We don't really talk about treatment and coping in a serious way. And I think a lot of that has to do with treatment is actually insanely complex. Treatment and the approach that you take to truly caring for yourself and learning how to care for yourself. If maybe you find that you are prone to sadness, right? That is a marathon effort that will probably last as long as your life does. And I think that for people that struggle with sadness in particular, I feel like that is a very daunting road to realize you are going to walk down. And I think with anxiety, anxiety is such a nervous energy. And I think there's a world where it can feel like a superpower at the same time. Right? Well, if I can figure out how to harness this anxiety, I'll actually just be more intentionally productive and I'll get more done and I'll just be a little less productive but still productive. And so I think mentally it's easier to wrap your brain around dealing with that. Whereas I think if you struggle and feel prone to sadness and feeling down and feeling like you can't move, of course you want to be told there's just a chemical in your brain that we need to give you more of, and that is going to fix the whole thing. And something that I've had with clients over the years, and I think this is specifically, and I want to hear more about what you're saying, because this is what's this bringing up for me, is I will have clients that will get on the meds, have been taking the meds, they are doing the things, and they're like, why am I still feeling this way? And I think professionally it's been hard for me to know, like, I don't know.
Depression is really hard to treat.
It's really, really hard. And the reason I say it is hard is not because this is any passing judgment on the client. No, God, no. There's a helplessness professionally when you recognize how deep your client can be in that. And it's just hard. It's just really, really hard. And it's not easy.
Well, I think the hardest thing about depression compared to anxiety even, and I think we're talking about sort of like specifically probably major depressive disorder compared to a lot of other types of depression, and we'll get into it. Kind of, there's a difference between anxiety and depression that coexist, which a lot of them do, and straight depression, treatment-resistant depression, things like that. And it's so hard because the things that will help are the antithesis of how you feel, and then you also don't get the same joy or satisfaction out of even doing the things that will help you. So it is really like, it's just really challenging compared to even with anxiety or other things. You can at least, even if you have to take opposite action, you can at least feel like you are satisfied or more excited about some of the progress you make, where depression just is like this fog that is sort of over everything that constantly makes you feel like, what is the point?
I think in all of this depression chat, and I think this is life in general right now, I think we are putting way too much freaking pressure on ourselves to be happy.
Yes.
I think there is way too much expectation placed on, I have to be happy. And it's like, well, happiness, like any other emotion, cannot be sustained in perpetuity. And I know some people are like, what do you mean by that? Like, how can you say that? Like, we should want to be happy. And it's like, right. Like, you will experience happiness and joy and excitement and fulfillment periodically. Depending on your life circumstances, sometimes that'll be multiple times throughout the day. Or sometimes that'll be weekly. Or sometimes in really dark times, it might be monthly. Right? And I think this idea of happiness feels so unattainable for so many people because they're so far from it, or feeling like they're so far from it, that I always want to bring my clients back down to earth when they're like, well, I just want to be happy. I want to find a way to, and I'm like, no. We gotta get rid of that word. I want you to focus on feeling content. How do we focus on feeling like, I'm okay? Right? Like, how can we stop this very dramatic, all or nothing, black and white, catastrophizing thinking error mess, and just allow ourselves to be mid? Let it be mid. It's okay to have a mid day.
Well, I think with social media too, like, we just weren't exposed to everyone having the best day of their life every day. Like, that is what is so hard about social media, is people post the positive, the highs and the lows, the extremes. So, and a lot of times if you want to be happy or you are feeling down about yourself, you're like, more susceptible, I think, to seeing those extremes as well. I mean, because I was looking into the research of even what some of this stuff says. And I think one thing that's really interesting is even when you look at the research about gratitude and positive thinking, I'm interested in your belief about positive thinking and affirmations, because I have like a very strong
Don't use them.
I know. But I really loved this quote from an article that said, the more positive fantasies the people created, the more depressed they became relative to how they felt before. The researchers believe that imagining good outcomes without putting in effort to achieve them creates a gap between the fantasy and the reality that deepens the depressive state.
Right.
The self-help market, fueled by positive thinking, is a $9.6 billion industry. And the question becomes, right, like, how much is this market making? They note that the self-help market is fueled by positive thinking, the ability that if you think positively, your life will change. And yeah, it's like a $9.6 billion industry.
Well, yeah, because you're offering people clear, simple solutions to the most complex issues of their life. And so if you sell them this very basic fix, that you're marketing to desperate people, and it's insanely gross to me. When it comes to positive affirmations, as I stare at my vision board.
Yeah, you do have a different, I mean, you like believe in vision boards.
I do.
And stuff like that.
I do. Here's how I see it. Now, also, I want to preface this with my pull to struggle is anxiety. Meaning, like, when I am going through a difficult time in my life, the way my mental health manifests is anxiety. I have had deep sadness and grief in my life. I don't think I would come close to fitting a depression symptoms list. That's just my makeup as a person. So for me, with my anxiety, how I've learned to channel some of it is I spend time being very intentional with where my thoughts are going, and not in a trying to control way, or not saying like, oh, I'm not going to think anything bad or negative or scary or anything like that. No. I use it as a roadmap for where I'm wanting to go. When I like write something out that I want to do, I get like as clear on it as I can, so that way I feel like there's a clear path to get to it. I know that I am going to show up and do the work to get as close to that place as I can. And I think you've known me long enough now that, like, when I say I'm going to do something, I'm more likely than not put my head down and I'll find a way to do it. So for me, I guess it's not even so much, I don't necessarily worry about affirmations, because I think the affirmations that I might need change from day to day. I think what I focus on and what I try to help my clients with as well is how to actually speak to yourself in a way that feels hopeful. Mm-hmm. And notice I'm not saying like positive or happy, yes, or manifesting, or I'm not talking about those things. How are you actually nice to yourself? Mm-hmm. Like, how maybe instead of just constantly saying like, see, up again, you screwed up again, you did this wrong again, this isn't going to work, this would never work. What if we just started to introduce, in addition to those voices, you did okay, you know you did the best you could, you showed up, you did something new, you tried this, you did that actually worked out better, right? It's not, for me, this idea of mindfulness and positive thinking, it's not about that. It's really about this concept of neuroplasticity, I guess, of rewiring your brain to start paying attention to other voices rather than just the ones that tell you why you are the world's biggest piece of garbage.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I think that I would agree with how you do it. Like, I think that you do it as like reminders of kind of what you want and what you're working towards. Mm-hmm. Rather than, I think the biggest pitfall for people is they think just saying it or writing it down or putting it in front of them as a picture will be the magical, like it falls too far into magical thinking, yes, where they think it's magic.
Right.
And I think that's for me where I get frustrated because I think it also like bleeds into spirituality sometimes, or like, I think I have such a negative reaction to it sometimes just because of my background in, I was sort of like, feel like I was duped sort of in like yoga training and stuff like that, where like it was really spiritual, the yoga training I did, which I like didn't realize I was signing up for. And we had to like read The Secret.
Oh boy.
I think, I am hyper sensitive because affirmations were just like forced down my throat.
Yes.
Reading The Secret was like forced down my throat, and I like bought into it. Like I definitely in my addiction fell down this like magical thinking rabbit hole. Like I was super into like, energy of green juices.
Yeah, right. And health and
all kinds of,
Yes.
So I'm so allergic to it now that like I don't think affirmations will ever work for me, but I understand how they work for some people. For me, my way that I do it with myself is I believe a lot in just kind of like diffusing from my thoughts. Like I don't take any of my thoughts seriously.
Yeah.
Rather than, because I can get very fixated on, especially, and if you've heard me talk before, I've talked about how I like, my anxiety can border on OCD with some magical thinking sometimes. I think for me, it's just not a good fit because I get very fixated on what I'm thinking and then I'm overly thinking about what I'm thinking. So it's easier for me to just be like, I'm going to lead from my values and what is important to me and not lead from this like panicky anxiety, the thoughts that come to my head. And that's helped me. I have much better self-talk now, but I'm less fixated on like, is my self-talk good or bad? And I'm just like, my self-talk doesn't matter. It's like what I do and how I feel and how I move through the world that makes a difference.
Yeah. No, I relate to that so much because I think we put way too much stock into what we think. Not that it doesn't matter, but we attach too much factuality to it.
Yeah.
Like everything is like, oh, if I'm thinking that, this must be, real, which is also a thinking error in and of itself because we misinterpret things all the time. We don't have all the information. We don't fully know everything. You can't possibly know everything someone is thinking ever, even if like you're married to them, right? Like every single person is a mystery in their own way, and yourself included. And when I have clients want to talk about like their mindset, which I also want to preface, I actually think is key in most things, right? Mm-hmm. Because what you just explained is mindset work.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like have such a reaction to the name of it, but you are correct.
Like you've retrained your brain to see yourself as not such a big deal. Meaning like the things that you think, what goes through your mind is just like, oh, it's just there. It just happens. And that is mindset work. And it was the same thing I was doing by saying I try to introduce different language when I notice I'm being incredibly hard on myself. Every single one of my clients right now, we're doing something involving like mindset work, right? And even my content on social media, I'm huge in reframing things, stating things in a different way, introducing topics in a different light. That's my whole thing, because I do find so much of what people struggle with internally is related to the situations they're experiencing in their life. I really do. It's not always the whole piece, but so many times when someone tells me like what they're struggling with, I'm like, yeah, you should be. That's a hard thing. That is a categorically difficult thing to be sorting through and hashing through and making sense of. I know that that's kind of unpopular because the reason I say that is because I think right now in the information ecosystem that we live in and the things that we have destigmatized and the things that we haven't, I do think a lot of people get trapped in the thinking that where they are now is where they will be forever.
Yes.
And I think sometimes when someone like me comes in and validates and says, yeah, this feels hard because it's hard, I think sometimes there can be okay, so you're just telling me it's going to feel like this forever.
Because you give that validation beat before you're like, and let's talk about what we can work on together.
Exactly. Being solutions focused is great, but solutions are not always immediately available.
I would argue that, and this we talk about if anyone's interested in, we did an episode called Therapy is Not Endless Validation, I believe.
Yeah.
Validation is the water I think you swim in versus the thing in therapy. It is like the context, it needs to come first. It's not the main course that's being served. It is like the palate cleanser that allows you to be able to digest the other things.
Yes. All right, everybody, gather around because Mother's Day is coming up, and I have the plan for how you are going to spoil your mom, a mom that is important to you, a mom of your friend, basically any mom that you would like. I'm going to give you the plan, okay? You are going to go to Cozy Earth, and you are going to get her literally anything. But ideally, the combo that I've come up with for my mom is we are going to do robes, slippers, sheets, and a blanket, okay? I am going to wrap my mom in the softest, coziest pajamas and sheets and robes and slippers that I have ever personally tried in my life. The reason I'm putting this package together like this is because I think it is so special for the women in our life who work so hard and give so much and rarely think of themselves, and they need to be thinking of themselves more, to give them this gift, whatever you end up getting them, right? To let them know that they need a moment to themselves. And they need a moment to rest and chill, and to do that in some of the most comfortable sheets, pajamas, blankets, robes, and slippers I have literally ever used in my life. So with that said, I also want to let you know, you get a 100-night sleep trial with any of the products. So you can try it for 100 nights and decide at any point in there that you don't like it and send it back. But also, if you do decide you like it, these products are covered with a 10-year warranty. You get 10 years of use out of these products. Your mom will thank you for this cost-saving measure gift, okay? So with all that said, I have a special gift for you. If you use code NUANCE at checkout, you get 20% off. That's code NUANCE, NUANCE, because home starts with mom. Can't wait to hear what you guys think.
Well, I think there's this thing too, and I've been depressed, very depressed, multiple times in my life. Besides not postpartum depression, perinatal depression when I was pregnant, and I had straight depression with that. A lot of mine like coincided with my addiction. So it always felt very like, yeah, my life is awful. No wonder I'm depressed. I didn't have hope for getting out of it sometimes because I didn't have hope that I would get into recovery. But it never, I think it's much scarier to sort of be in depression in the middle of nowhere that comes at you compared to being like, yeah, my circumstances make sense of why this sucks and no one would be happy. And that was actually what scared me a lot more when I was pregnant, because I was like, I want to be pregnant. This felt like such a chemical hijacking of my body that was it was much more like out of body, sort of alarming to me. But I think what you're talking about of the gap being wide and how you work through it, that's so hard. The metaphor I always use that I love is like, you know, you're kind of like in a cave when you're depressed, and the solution is you have to walk deeper through, because it's not a cave, it's a tunnel, and you will get to the other side, but it feels like a cave because you can't see anything. So you're just like, you want me to walk deeper into this cave that is stupid and illogical and makes no sense? But it isn't a cave. It is a tunnel, but the depression makes it impossible to see that. And that is what is so goddamn hard about it.
Right. Well, and it's terrifying to think of going deeper into something.
Yes.
When you already feel like it's pitch dark.
Yeah. I mean, I'm terrified of caves, like in terms of if you've ever, you know what, not like an actual cave, but like the idea of like crawling in a cave.
No. Did I tell you about the most upsetting thing I've ever done in my life?
No, tell me.
When I went to Australia in 2019, we went to this place called the Jenolan Caves, and they're like way out. They're like probably like 4 hours outside of Sydney, and they are these incredible cave systems that are out there, and you're almost getting to the outback when you're there, but it's like this beautiful like forested oasis. Like while we were driving there were like kangaroos on the side of the road.
Yeah,
it's really cool, which are their version of like deer if you live in the Northeast. So they're not that excited about it, but we were. I also found out that people will come to the United States to see deer.
Oh wow,
like they're that excited about it. So anyway, we went into the cave system and we went like all the way down, and they have like 5 different ones that you can like pick to walk through.
Yeah.
And it was insane. There was this one part where we were walking over, there was like a bridge. And I remember looking down and I was like, there's nothing down there. Why are we just, it's just sand. And the guy was like, no, look at it. And it was water. And like, it was so pristine.
Yeah.
Like, we couldn't bring anything into, like, the cave system. Like, we had to lock everything in a locker. We couldn't have, there's no food, no drink. Like, it was insane. But anyway, so when we got to the very, very bottom, we had been walking for probably like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And he turned off the light.
Ugh.
That was, I've never experienced anything like that in my life. And I don't know if I ever will. That was that type of like darkness and recognizing there's no light source. Like, you're down in the bottom of the earth. And anyway, but that, I think that moment sometimes that feels like an illustration of depression. And I think it's like I'm asking somebody to like turn off that light and turn around and try to walk back. And that's really scary, but yet I hold all of your hands while I say this. Like, do you want to stay there then?
Right.
Right? Like, do you want to stay there? Or do you want to maybe walk forward and you might trip over a couple rocks? But we'll like get through it, you know? And I think that is a type of tough love that I think is kind of unpopular on the internet. People don't like to hear that. I think people want to hear like, no, it's okay where you are and we'll just sit with where you are in perpetuity.
And you can.
Yeah, you can.
It just, you know.
But then
isn't great.
No. And you know, whatever you're not happy about with your life will continue.
Yeah, I think that's what, you know, it's just so unsatisfying to work on depression or to get better from depression, I think, because it's like these little things that don't mean anything in the interim until they start building into something. And I think that is the hardest part about change when we're talking about like mental health specifically, is a lot of these little things. We don't want to take little steps because we want to feel better fast. So we want to do this big, bold thing. And then either it's too big and we fail, and then we're right back where we started, except now we feel like more of a failure. Or we do it for, you know, a short period of time and then claim it doesn't work. And then we feel worse also.
Right. Because the perfectionism.
Yes. And you want to feel better. So tell me, Sam, because we've talked a lot about depression. Some of the research I got into that was so interesting was I've always like, you know, talked about sort of overfunctioning and underfunctioning. Right. And we talk a lot on this podcast about how to be able to change, it's like small incremental steps. And if you are struggling to take action, break it into the smallest thing possible. But I didn't ever look into like the actual research on it. And this is some of the stuff that I think is really fascinating. My take is, right, we often see depression most as actually a cycle. And if you look at it in terms of like threat response, and you can tell me, Sam, what you think about this, but I kind of think of it as, right, if you're in anxiety, your stress response is activated, you're doing everything, you fall into overfunctioning. Anxiety says to do more, so you overcommit, you optimize, you take on doing all of the things, and then it's not sustainable, so your body and brain crash, and then you kind of crash and you beat yourself up, you feel worse, until then you feel the anxiety of it, right? That's sort of the depression is the crash. Then your anxiety kicks back in that you're not doing enough. Then you feel even more of that anxiety that I have to do more. And that is how you can get stuck in this chronic cycle of over and under functioning. So what I really thought was so interesting about this was when I dug into the research, there was a study in the Netherlands that tracked people's mental states 5 times a day. And worrying was like the bridge that connected anxiety and depression together, which isn't, right, surprising, but it really shows you how like the worry drives all of this action. Then the action and overdoing is what exhausts you. Then you crash, and then you worry about being behind. And then that is kind of how it works. And based on this journal, it says that researchers following people with anxiety and depression over time, that these symptoms of anxiety and depression don't stay separate. They use the term illness extension to describe what happens. A mental illness expands beyond its original boundaries. Anxiety doesn't just stay anxiety, it gradually pulls depressive symptoms into the picture, recruiting them, even in people who are only diagnosed with anxiety to begin with. And once both are active, the whole thing becomes harder to treat because they're more likely to interact and spiral each other. And I just thought that was fascinating that there's actual research that explains this mechanism. And it also gives credence to what we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, which is why it is not just as simple as depression equals low serotonin, get more serotonin. It's also why like SSRIs can work for anxiety and depression. It's very complicated.
It's insane. Well, because the brain is insanely complicated.
Yeah.
It's like, I think when you've studied this stuff and you've seen it in action in the people you've worked with over the years, and you get better at kind of like refining your approach and like getting predictive of what the path is going to be for like dealing with it and working with it, right? I think sometimes it's like really nice to hear the validation of like what you've just been kind of keeping to yourself of like knowing that it's going to be this bounce back and forth. But also I feel like that bounce just happens. You could oscillate between those two things in any circumstance in your life, depending on what's going on and depending on if it's like a destabilizing experience for you. Like I think it feels like it just makes so much sense to me that they would feed off of each other if nobody's ever stepped in to help you say like, hey, you don't have to feel either of these things if you don't want to.
Well, and the anxiety serves a good purpose. Also, a lot of people really like their anxiety in some ways because it makes them really productive. And I'm telling on myself here.
Same.
And even my insomnia, Sam, like I was so resistant to get on meds to sleep because I was like, I do so much work at night.
Really?
Yeah. I was like, what am I going to do?
Girl.
I'm going to lose so many hours of work. And now I look back and I'm like, oh my God, I spent so much time managing my sleep. I wasted so much time trying to fall asleep, getting up, going back to bed. I read so much less because I used to read all these random books in the middle of the night. But yeah, it's just fascinating how we hold on to these things that are not serving us because we're like, it makes me productive or it's good for me.
Well, and I think sometimes you'll think to yourself like, well, it's not hurting me that bad, right? Because it's just your baseline.
Yes.
It's your norm.
You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know. So it's fine. It's working. I think with this, it's like everything that we try to normalize, which is if you're experiencing this, it's not a moral failing of yours. Or if this is something you wrestle with, it's not because somebody else's brain is just better than yours or, you know, they're this or they're that. Like it's just life. Life is hard. And some of us are more prone to things than others. And if we are, the only thing that is expected of us is that we try to utilize every tool at our disposal to try to make it better and to try to allow ourselves some grace that it is going to take time. And I think with depression, I know that that's like really scary and dark to hear. And yet you don't, I also want to close with this too. You don't have to be happy about needing to like take care of yourself. That's not a prerequisite about it. You don't have to think it's the greatest thing that's ever happened to you, that you've realized you do need a routine and there are certain things you need to do and you do need to eat certain foods and you do need to move your body at the level that you're able, right? That you don't have to be happy about that. It's okay to feel at best neutral, that those are things that you need to do. And also to not set yourself up for failure that, well, I'm going to do this and I will feel this way afterwards. Not every exercise is a spiritual experience. Not every coping skill is going to be the thing that turns the day right around. It could be the thing that just makes the day survivable. And that is okay. There is no rush. I know we wish there was a rush. I know our anxiety and our perfectionism And our all or nothing thinking is wanting that to be the one thing because we don't want to have to face the fact that life is a marathon.
It is.
It is. It is a daily marathon that flows and changes and throws curveballs, and it's predictable and unpredictable all at the same time.
My life got so much better when I started living my life like it was like an experiment.
That is so good.
Every month, every week, every season is I'm going to be like in a lab being like, a little bit of this, a little more walking, a little more sleeping, a little more TV, a little less TV, a little more vegetables, a little more, like you're going to need different things in different seasons in your life. And that is okay. And that is like the best advice I have because I am so prone to whatever I'm feeling right now. I think will be that way
for forever.
Forever. And then I get hopeless real quick. And I really struggle to get out of that. So if you can just be like, we're always going to be trying to find equilibrium. And I think that makes it so much easier. And then you can also, like you said, Sam, be unhappy about it and be annoyed that you require a mental health walk every day.
Yeah. Be annoyed that you're a plant. Like that's okay. You can be annoyed at that. And hope you got something from this episode.
Let us know if you guys like more of the research, what you're thinking.
Yeah. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Also, as per usual, anything you can do to, if this episode felt helpful, if you can rate, review, share, subscribe.
We have some great episodes on Substack. So come over to Substack. We're doing like 1 to 2 bonus episodes a month, and they're very fun and casual.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.